that if the planetary expansion model is accurate, we might see that the planet is actually expanding, getting larger. If that were the case, we could still have a global coastal event, but it would be the other way. All of a sudden, the tide would retreat and not come back. And maybe Puget Sound would lose most of its water. And I would suddenly be 300 feet above the lower water level, that kind of a thing.
Right.
But that would also cause the population to move, because all of a sudden, all global shipping would be interrupted. And we'd have to reestablish ports and all of this.
Yes. Well, does something like that happen on an immediate process? I mean, like over a period of 4 or 5 days or 4 or 5 months?
Well, the speculation in the past, and that's what we have to go on, we have to assume to a certain extent that past behavior is an indicator of future performance in these kind of things. We've seen large glacial masses that have been able to shift themselves in a matter of weeks, and most of the activity took place within a shorter period of time, maybe 1 week out of the, say, 6 weeks. And within that 1 week, most of the activity of that 1 week took place in a single day. So if you think about it that way, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yes.
The Laurentian ice sheet shifted off of 1/3 of Canada, reputedly, to our best guess at the moment, took between 6 weeks and 6 months. However, most of the shift took place within a single day, within a single week.
That's too fast for me. All right, stay right where you are, everybody. We've got to take a quick break here. We're at the bottom of the hour. And when we come back, we're going to continue on. I'm going to get to a lot of your emails that we have lined up here. I'm just going to get them in order during the break point. So stay right where you are. It is coming to the end of 2008 here on the East Coast of the United States anyway. And we're going to usher that in. My guest tonight, Clif from Half Past Human. We'll be back right after these messages. Welcome back, everybody. I guess I should turn my mic up. That would usually help, wouldn't it? Welcome back to Paranormal Radio. It is Wednesday night, New Year's Eve. We're ushering in 2009 out there on the East Coast. And who knows how long we're going to be broadcasting tonight. We could go for a while. You know that KVMP 99.9 FM here in Central Texas is kind of encouraging us to stay on longer tonight. They're kind of our flagship station out here, which we don't mind that one bit, usually. But we'll see how things go. My guest tonight is Clif from Half Past Human. We're talking about some of the forecasts that we are seeing in this data for 09. Very interesting stuff. Everything from possibly bad things for coastal areas to, of course, the collapse of the death of the dollar. Not the collapse, the death of the dollar. That wouldn't be a good thing. Looking back at 2008, there were some pretty amazing events that happened throughout 2008. One of them being, of course, was the elections. And last time we had Clif on, we talked a little bit about the elections, the upcoming elections, and how things were going to go. We're going to have him reflect on that a little bit for us to let us know if the data was correct of what you saw. How was the data? Did it jive with what you were seeing, Clif?
To a certain extent, the interpretation was off slightly, because we did indeed see the call for early elections that we had thought, that we'd actually talked about way back in January of 2008. But on the whole, it matched up the linguistics, of course, with variations. And basically, we now know with certainty that if we can describe it really well, we're probably off a little bit. That it'll always be more complex and a little bit more multifaceted than we can anticipate.
Did you? What was the most accurate forecast or information that you got over the period of 2008?
The best forecast we had was about the horrific Chinese quake. We'd seen that from early, or I shouldn't say that. I mean, the most accurate was probably the release language about the current economic crisis, the way we're in it now and the way we're discussing it now, as opposed to the way we discussed it prior to October 7th. It wasn't global, it wasn't systemic, it wasn't everywhere, it wasn't a depression. Now you see that word used all the time, whereas barely 2 years ago when we were saying that on October 7th, 2008, we'd start getting into the depression word, it was hardly heard at all. But the most staggering, I think, was getting the 36 to 38-hour warning, something like that, about the quake in China. And we had even had some discussion on our linguistics, which appeared many, many months ahead of time, almost a year ahead of time, I think, about weddings being interrupted and brides in tattered dresses and so on. And 2 weeks after the quake actually occurred, out come all these pictures that were emblematic to the Chinese people of the quake damage itself, which was this particular 200 to 300, 400-year-old chapel that was destroyed by the quake, and it was used only for weddings, and the number of weddings were indeed interrupted, and the people had to climb from the rubble and so on. So that was really good for us relative to being able to tune our system, because we saw the language appear after the manifestation of the quake, and we're able to go back and match it to our predictions and see where we were accurate and sort of fine-tune things a bit.
Yes. In the last interview we had, a listener out there sent in an email from it that says, I really enjoyed your last intelligent interview with Clif on October 13th at 08. In your next interview, could you please ask him for more information about the pulse theory of relativity he briefly discussed? How can I access more information about this?
That's a real good question. I've known about it for so long, I don't remember really where I came across it. It's not unique to Western civilization. It's discussed in Sanskrit frequently. The Taoists know about it. Probably the most coherent discussion of it would be found in some of the Russian literature that relates to metaphysics. Most of the Anglo-American English metaphysicists have avoided getting down to this level of description of reality. But you could probably look to English language translation of Tibetan Buddhist literature about the galactic pulse. I'll see if I can't find some keywords to hunt on that will haul up more language, but it's been a long time since I've actually delved into the guts of that. Paul LaViolette, though, speaks of it tangentially in his books about the electric universe, and it forms one of the basic premises from which the whole electric universe concept emerges, as well as the planetary expansion model. And the idea being that there's this pulse that comes out of the middle of the galactic center, which instantly comes from the center of the universe, goes to the galactic center, goes from the galactic center instantly to all the various stars, and from them to all the various planets, and from each planet to everything on the planet. This forms the underlying matrix of ideas about not only karma, but also yin and yang and the various different kinds of energies. And it occurs this way at 22 trillion times a second to form the illusion of a material reality, because basically our brains are working at movie level speed, or even at best high definition speed, which might be, say, 30, 40, 50, 60 frames a second, and not 22 trillion times a second. So we perceive our fingers, which are composed of the same stuff as the rest of the matter, as touching something solid. It also can account for the planetary expansion model, because if accurate, the idea is that this pulse travels outside of time, but is nonetheless energy. And the energy, as seen by Einstein, has to do something, so to speak. And in this case, in the middle of each and every one of the planets and all the suns, it converts some portion of itself to matter, thus causing the planet to swell from the middle, so to speak. It also accounts for magnetism on the planet itself, which is not accounted for molten rock. Molten iron, by the way, will not hold a magnetic charge. No matter where it is, no matter what size of molten iron you have. You need a plasma, an energetic field, in order to produce a magnetosphere around a planet. So it's quite clear that we're dealing with something other than a big giant molten ball of iron in the middle of our planet. And yes, it could be that solidified iron within our crust could hold magnetic charge, but it's of such a low grade it can't account for the magnetosphere. So this gives some validity to the idea that there's a giant plasma reactor in the center of the Earth. And when the plasma reactor gets more energy from that pulse, it grows bigger, which kind of puts pressure on the crust around it, which may be causing the stuff we're seeing at Yellowstone, the Ring of Fire, etc., at this point in time. And that would kind of make sense, because our solar system has been trucking about in this little procession, but it's also been moving about from arm to arm of the Milky Way galaxy, and we're about to get into alignment with a very much more energetic area of space. And in fact, we've probably been in it since 1940s or so. So that kind of makes sense that if we're getting a lot more energy, maybe the conduit, so to speak, to get these pulses out of the galactic center is a lot clearer. We're going to get a lot more of them, and maybe the Earth's going to go and gain a little bit of weight and expand a bit.
We talked last time we had you on. I was telling you about that psychic little moment that I had that completely took me by surprise. I mean, it was interesting. And you said to me, it very well could be the universe trying to tell you something if we could just figure out what it was.
Yes. There's always a catch.
Yes, indeed. And it got me thinking after that. I listened to the archive of that program when you said that again. I started thinking, well, maybe these little psychic sessions or little blinks of psychic ability that people have could be something instilled in us a little bit as far as our instinct, our natural instincts to even survive, our animal instincts, something that tells us when danger is happening. Because I got this email here. It says, Jack, I'm really enjoying the program tonight, although everything seems doom and gloom. It's kind of scary. Does he ever get any uplifting information? And so I brought this up because is that possible? I mean, is it part of our instinct to survive, these little psychic blinks and watching out for danger? I mean, if it's going to tell us that a butterfly...
It would have to be at that level. I mean, it's a tool like all other tools in relating our consciousness to material universe. And they're actually, by the way, known far and wide as sync winks, synchronistic winks from universe, so to speak. And these are indeed, that's the more successful hunter, and his DNA is going to be propagated because he can bring back more venison because he's psychically attuned and gets these little winks from universes to where the herd's going to be, that kind of thing. I'm sure that exists all the time, but I don't know that its highest and best use is at the animal level. I think that you can also apply it consciously.
Yes.
And as to getting good information, well, we kind of do get hints of positive developments, but we also have to bear in mind that for at least a number of years, perhaps decades, 30 or 40 years here, 30, 40 years, we've had monopolistic media that has been forcing a diet on us of negatively focused words. And so we're going to get a preponderance of those in our system, and we recognize this, and this is what we mean when we say that our system is predisposed to picking up extreme language, and thus our interpretations are based on extreme sets of language, not a more normal or common set of language. So if we were looking at a pastoral village, for instance, in Italy, that made cheese and raised goats for goat hair vests, their normal state of language would not necessarily be extreme, and we'd be able to interpret it, assuming there was enough mass, etc., of linguistics. We'd get a different set of results from them, I'm sure. But living in the media-dominated world, we have to acknowledge that there's a deliberate use of fear-based language in emotionally connected context to attempt to drive social norms or the global consensus, if you will. So our hints of positive developments are at this stage a little bit out there in terms of about 6 or 8 years out, and they're a little bit more vague in the sense of there at least will be a resurgence, if you will, a renaissance that will take over the North American continent. Whether we continue to call ourselves the United States of America or not is immaterial. The populace here will go through some kind of a renaissance beginning in about 6 years from now that will lead the planet in what we're calling the new electrics. And this is an entirely new technology beyond anything that we can even conceptualize now because it's in our future. And it's kind of like we're presented a fuzzy picture of an electric train to a caveman, ask him to sketch it, and he can at best get just the general shape of things. And that's kind of where we're at with this, because apparently there's going to be some kind of a breakthrough technology over these next 6 or 8 years that is so fundamental that the words at the moment don't exist to adequately describe it in our current context. Boy, I hope that was clear.
It's okay if I... Well, here's one thing that's very interesting. I mean, we know that with the Hadron Collider...
Correct.
They're going to be... I know that they have...